Hello everyone and welcome back to Age of Nagash, which is a channel dedicated to Age of Sigmar. And in this video we are going to be doing a beginner's guide to Ender spells, as someone on my Discord called Matt sort of gave me the idea behind it, because I know a lot of people are put off by Ender spells because they think they're a little bit too complicated, and I was similar until I actually looked into them, and actually they're not too hard to use at all. So hopefully you'll have a better understanding by the end of this video. In this video, we have a couple of guests. So we have got Max, who you will know from our Caradon Overlord video and some other things, and Zeech. And we have a brand new person called Matt, who gave me the idea in the first place from the Discord, who hasn't really ever used Ender spells and is interested to learn how they work. So hopefully he'll be able to ask some of the questions that you might have in your head, as well as a person who are new to the idea of using Ender spells. So guys, how are we doing?
Oh, yeah, we're good. We're good, thank you.
All good. Decently fine.
Fantastic. And in case anyone wants to know, because I know like Matt and Max might sound like a little bit confusing, I might hopefully won't mix up the names. Matt is the British person, Max is the German person, so at least we have got, I mean, it's easy when we've got Martin, because he has got a very good Scottish accent. Right, so with that, let's get into it. So the first thing I want to talk about, essentially I'm screen recording this on a PowerPoint, as you can see, and we're going to go through each slide and take things in order. So going on to the first thing, I got basically a summary of how Ender spells generally work. So I've put things down like Ender spells, they cost additional points. So when you're list building, an Ender spell is going to cost you points in the same terms like a unit or a hero would cost you points, compared to lore spells you get from battle tomes, where it's just you can pick them for free. They cast like normal spells, so a hero needs to roll like 2 dice and try and cast a certain Ender spell on a 6+, those sort of things. Only one Ender spell can be cast by each wizard per turn, and they can be unbound in your hero phase instead of casting a spell. They move at the start of the battle round after priority has been decided, but before the first turn of the battle round. The player going second in the battle round can move the first spell. Like I say, that's generally, there's a couple of exceptions. They can be dispelled. And
so I have one question at the beginning.
Yep, absolutely.
Which isn't actually clear to me, and I'm assuming these are things that you, to start off with, you have to cast to put on the board. But do you deploy them first, or do you have to cast them like a spell?
You have to cast them like a spell first, and then you'll get to deploy them.
Yeah,
Pretty much they're kept off the board, but you have to tell your opponent that they're part of your list.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's essentially how it works. And then just like a couple other things, so they can be dispelled and cast again in the same turn in case you want to redeploy it. So let's say that means I suppose dispelled and cast. Yeah, that makes sense. So essentially, let's say you've got an Ender spell on the board from something you cast from a couple of turns back, but it's not in the place you want it to be anymore. If you're in range of it, you can dispel it and then cast it again. Presumably that wizard can cast 2 spells as an example, and reuse it. So essentially that Endless spell, when it gets dispelled at some point throughout the game, it's not gone forever. It's not that you can't set it up again. You can try and cast it again, and you do dispel them like you do with a normal spell. Like if an enemy tries to put a Mystic Shield on something and you want to stop them, it's the same way. And then one player can't have 2 of the same Ender spell in his or her list. I understand there's quite a lot of information here, especially for new people, but I try to bullet point it. What's on your mind with that, Matt? Have you got any sort of questions regarding that?
No, actually, that seems a lot more straightforward than what I was thinking. Basically, I get the impression that you're just taking an extra spell for your wizard, but this spell has a model that represents it, I guess.
Yeah, I'd like to add that this Ender spell, as soon as it's part of your list, it's not only known by one wizard, but by all wizards capable of potentially casting it.
Exactly.
So it's not not bound by one wizard. And the way you dispel them is by looking at the war scroll and making an ordinary casting roll and overcoming their casting value.
Yes, good point. Yeah, that is how you do it. So there are, as you'll see, there are some spells that are quite high to cast. So that means that if you've got an army that you can give yourself lots of pluses to cast, you can, I don't know, summon a endless spell that casts on an 8, and then it's going to be harder for the enemy to try and unbind it because they might not get as many pluses to cast. So it is quite interesting. And there are also some things like, I know we talked about some obscure things like in the Zeech Battletome, the Lord of Change can like eat endless spells and stuff. There are few examples, but so does that sound alright for a summary?
Yeah. Let's proceed.
Fantastic. And when I say like you can't have two of the same spell on the list, it means that you can't have like two big purple suns in your list or something. You can't summon two at the same time. It feels a little bit like unique characters, that sort of thing. You can't.
Opponent. So say if I had a purple, so my opponent had a purple, so can there be both on the board at the same time?
No. The same endless spell cannot be present on the board twice.
Right.
If you and your opponent both brought the purple sun, one of them has to be the one that's currently present has to be dispelled first.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Also, I think it would be good to cover interactivity regarding models and enter spells a bit. Enter spells overall are treated as friendly models by both armies, meaning neither of them can attack the enter spell or interact with it in any hostile way. That also means enter spells have bases that you cannot walk across.
Yes, so they can be like, you might look at a spell and you think that doesn't look very powerful or something like that, but the size of its base means that you could like block off like, you know, choke points and stuff in the game, even if the spell doesn't really do anything, just because you've like set it up. You've the enemy can't cross its base. So let's say you set it up between two buildings, you've made like basically a blockade that the enemy can't really do anything about it unless they can fly or something like that. So that's sort of like the extra tactics of those spells.
Sometimes enter spells aren't cast for what they are meant to do, but rather just to put. Imagine having this like dumb, friendly, smiling giant sitting in your way, not knowing you want to get past. It's just sitting there being annoying in your way. You have to go around it.
Yeah. So basically, they can be used more for anything rather. They don't have to just be used for their initial power, as it were. It can be used as an obstacle.
Yes.
Exactly. That's where there's some spells that are very cheap, and we'll get to this later, but things like, when I've played a couple of games, it's like the Ostrich Bone Reapers, their spells are really, really cheap. So something like the Soul Stealer Carrion, I think it's called. Basically, if you know the Bone Reapers, it's the big ghosty looking spell they have that's in the shape of like a bird. And the base of that is massive. And when you set it up, you can set up anywhere on the board. So sometimes I will just cast it because I think it costs so little on points. Like we're talking 10 to 30 points. That I'll just cast it and set up on the enemy's territory just to like be annoying and get in the way. It's just, so that's something that you don't really think about until you start using them as spells. So there's a lot to them. So with that, let us go into the next slide, which is all about endless spells that are available to everyone. Because like we said, and we'll show them later, there are faction-specific spells. But in this video, we're mainly going to be talking about the endless spells that are available to everyone. So that's going to be things like all the spells you get in Malign Sorcery, which we'll go through. The Balewind Vortex, which is like the Warhammer Fantasy. I don't know if it was a spell then or a scenery piece, but basically something that survived the world that was. And then we had the Forbidden Power box set, which is like the expansion from Malign Sorcery. So they are the like 3 separate things that you can buy for spells for everyone that I can think of. So with that, let us go into the first thing, which is going to be Malign Sorcery. Okay, so the first spell I want to talk about is called the Purple Sun of Shyish. So what I've done on this PowerPoint is essentially I've tried to make simplified war scrolls, and it may still look like quite a bit of text, but what I've done is I've taken away like all the lore and everything, so it's maybe a bit easier to read, hopefully. So the Purple Sun, which there's a picture on the screen, it's the big purple ball with spikes in it and a skull. It's the Pokemon, which I can't remember its name, but a lot of people have compared it to that. And what I've done on the text is I've broken it down to 4 categories, which is how it works, what it does, its strengths in my personal opinion, and its weaknesses in my personal opinion as well. So I have to say in my personal opinion, otherwise some people might disagree with me, and if I say in my honest opinion, then that gets all the discrimination out of the way or whatever. Let's move on. So how it works. So it casts on a 6+. So again, like we said, just like how a normal wizard would cast it, roll 2 dice, and in this case you try and get a 6 or more. The opponent can still try and unbind your casting of the spell before you set up the endless spell as normal. In this case, the Purple Sun, you set up it wholly within 6 inches of the caster. It's predatory, so it moves 8 inches, or a move of 12 if you're fighting in the realm of death. And that's something you'll see with quite a few of these spells. If they are playing in a certain realm, they get empowered, and that is partly lore reasons, but it can sometimes increase the movement, increase their damage output depending on what realm they are fighting. As it is, the Purple Sun of Shyish kind of give you a bit of a hint there. Pardon? So it can be. It can move when it is set up, or when it does for. Okay, so it can move when it's set up. There's a little bit of echo I can hear on my mic. Can you guys hear that?
Yeah,
I did hear.
Yeah,
have you? A bit.
It's only a little bit.
Sorry, I got distracted, so I don't quite know what was going on. I'm assuming we're still on the Purple Sun.
Yeah, still on the.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, still on the Purple Sun. So basically, what I was saying is that I can't hear myself echo anymore, so it should be fine. Essentially, how it works: it casts on 6+, so like a normal wizard, you roll 2 dice, try and get 6 or more. The enemy can try and unbind it as normal before you set up the model. You set it up wholly within 6 inches of the caster. It's predatory, so it means the spell itself can move 8 inches, or it can move 12 inches if you're fighting in the realm of death, because of these spells, a lot of them are connected to realms and can be enhanced and empowered when they're playing in certain realms. And this spell can move when it is set up, and that is something important to note because not every spell can do that. What does it do? So for each unit it moves across or finishes a move within 1 inch, roll a dice for each model in the unit. For each 6+, a model from that unit is slain. If the unit has wounds characteristic of 6 or more, it suffers 2d6 mortal wounds instead. Its second ability is it subtracts 1 from bravery characteristics of all units while they are within 6 inches of this model. So what I've said the strengths for this model is hordes, particularly if more than 1 wound model. So if we've got like I don't know, a massive block of Chaos Warriors, or the big unit of Fire Slayers that people run around with, because they're 2 wound models, you're getting the most out of it. And you still got a high model count, so you're rolling lots of dice. I said it's good against low bravery armies as it helps towards doing a bravery bomb. So when the enemy comes to battle shock, if they haven't got a way to inspire its presence or ignore the bravery phase, they may take a bit of a hit from this. Also, if you've got things like a Terrorgeist and stuff, you can basically advance your shooting capabilities. And then what I said for weaknesses is it's got a high hasn't really got a high casting value, I don't know why I put that, and it can hurt you as well. That's sort of the main thing I've put. That essentially you'll see a lot with the ender spells, is they can hit you back quite hard if you don't deploy them properly. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Overall, on predatory spells, I believe that it was originally meant to somewhat work with the complaints that double turns are too powerful, by providing an incentive for a player to give the initiative away, pretty much, in order to move their endless spells. For some spells, sometimes it's good enough to work. Not all that often. Endless spells are great, but I don't think they quite did that. However, the Purple Sun itself is a spell I personally don't take. It's, in my opinion, too expensive for what it does, for only doing something on 6s.
It did drop down in points.
It did, but it's very situational. Like, when you run that thing into a horde of 60 grots, yeah, that's a lot of dice. But do the grots really care? Because it's only on 6s. Probably not.
No, that's sort of why.
However,
sorry.
its favorite target, in my opinion, is the very common maxed out group of Ogre Gluttons, which have 4 wounds each. So on even 12 of them, you get statistically 2 6s, which means you just dealt 8 wounds to this group. And that's a lot. That's really good.
Yeah.
But it's situational.
It is like, also, just something I want to point out, I was wrong when I said cast on a 6, it actually casts on 8, that's why I said in weaknesses it's got a high casting value. I thought that was wrong. So it casts on 8, so yeah, it is quite hard to cast. Also, something I'd say as well what against it is, if you're not playing in the Realm of Death, it only moves 8 inches and you've got to set up this thing wholly within 6 inches of the caster. So that is kind of like a maximum move of like 14 inches, which particularly early on in the game it's not great. But if like if a wizard who likes to say sit in back of the board is casting this spell.
Yeah, especially that wholly within part matters when you have this little range, because for this spell it means it has this kind of long elongated oval base. And it means the entire base has to be wholly within those 6 inches.
Yeah, and it's a big base.
Just it gives way more potential to backfire, because that elongated base will then therefore be closer to the caster than to potentially to your enemy.
Yeah, it's a cool spell, but it's not. It's one of those, isn't it? You can say that of everything. You can take it and you might roll loads of 6s, and it'll be really cool, especially against something like Gluttons. But you could take it, you could roll no 6s. I like it how something takes 2d6 mortal wounds if it's got a wounds counter of 6 or more, just so it can maybe do something against those high wound models, like single models. It's not going to do it. There's a chance it might do something horrific rather than just no chance at all. So I appreciate that. But is there anything you'd like to add, Matt? Any questions?
No questions on it. Just although it's not probably the best of spells, I must admit I really do like that model though. And I would be tempted to take it just for see the model on the board itself, to be honest. And with the being able to hurt you as well as your foes, I think that just adds a bit extra more fun. I don't think I'd take it if I was trying to play something competitive, but non-competitive, it would be quite fun to see it on the board.
Yeah, what I'd say, so how I've sort of gone through this PowerPoint is looking at a more sort of match play competitive vibe to it. But if you are playing narrative or just generally quote unquote for fun, these spells are a good laugh. Like me and a buddy, when all this lockdown is over, we're going to go through the Wrath of the Everchosen like narrative campaign, and we're going to be running loads of endless spells for good or for wrong, just to see what they do on the table and just to have some fun with them. Because I'll be honest, before I actually did this like PowerPoint, there are still things about endless spells I didn't really know, so it's been quite interesting doing that. And that's mainly because I haven't really seen too many on the table. So like you were saying, Matt, just taking this just for a bit of a fun game, you might actually find ways for it to work in a more competitive sense, because I haven't really seen this much on the table, so not a lot of people have got practice with it, so you may find a way.
They might be especially interesting to you because, as you said, you're playing Cities of Sigmar, which have the Allegiance ability to always treat those spells as if they were empowered by their respective realms, which makes especially this one gives this one a greater range, which might make it more useful than I want to give it credit for.
Yeah, it's... Ooh, trying to remember the name. Is it a certain city?
No, I think it's all of them.
It's all of them. There's just a certain city that's very good at magic, isn't it? I remember now.
There's one, but I think it's the ability, the Universal Allegiance ability called Amplified Sorceries, that treats endless spells as if they would always be empowered when cast by City of Sigmar mages.
Which is great. Okay, so with this end of spell, I think we've viewed it enough. Let's move on to the next one, which is also quite a big one. So this is the Ravanax Gnashing Jaws. So how it works, it casts on an 8+. You set up wholly within 6 inches of the caster. It is a predatory spell, so it moves 12 inches. Or a move of 12 inches plus a d6 inches if fighting in the realm of beasts, and it can also move when set up. So what it does is, after this model has moved, each unit that has any models it passed across and each other unit that is within 1 inch of it at the end of its move suffers a d3 mortal wounds. In addition, subtract 1 from the brave characteristics of each unit that has any models it passed across until the end of the battle round. So again, what I've put for strengths is it's good against elite armies. I mainly said that just because of the mortal wound output. It's good against low bravery armies, again similar to the Purple Sun because it helps towards a bravery bomb. I've also said it's quite cheap because it's 30 points. For weaknesses, I put high casting value, and again, it can hurt you as well. What are our sort of thoughts on this?
I personally like it a bit more than the Purple Sun, but mostly for its cost and for its visuals, because with 50 points, the Purple Sun competes with a command point, which I could buy for the same price.
Yeah.
Whereas for 30 points, it could just happen that I have 30 points left over to use, so that spell would just be nice to have. I might not use it, but it's nice to have the option.
Definitely. I know, like, times...
Yeah, I feel much the same.
Sorry, Matt.
I feel much the same. I'm probably more likely to take this one if I was looking at the them all and the points and stuff, because command points they're quite more worth taking sometimes. So yeah, I'd be seriously considering this one.
And like what you guys have picked on as well, aesthetically it looks great. I've seen someone turn this into a squig as well. But what I was going to say, yeah, it's a nice spell. It's again has got a high casting value, and it can hurt you. But I'm pretty sure about 70% of the spells can hurt. Can turn back on you. But it's just it's cool. And for 30 points, like we're saying, command points are 50 points, aren't they? So I don't know about you, but there's a lot of the time where I will list build and I'll make a 2,000 point army, like all just list building it, and I'm trying to aim to have like 50 points left over at the end for a command point, but it doesn't matter what I do, I'm only left with 40 points, and I'm like, what can I do with that 40 points? You can buy this, be 10 points under, and then maybe get a triumph as well, so has got that. But no, this is cool. And is you generally are surprised by the size of this model when you see it on the board. Okay, so let us move on to the next one. This is one that it's not too bad. It is 50 points, so it's going to cost you the same as command points, so worth bearing in mind. But this is the is it the Aetheroid Pendulum? Is that how it's pronounced?
Yes, that's correct.
Fantastic. So what it does is it casts on a 8+. You set up wholly within 6 inches of the caster. It is predatory again, so it moves 8 inches. And then how you move it, essentially, you pivot the model. But when the direction you're deciding to make the model face, when you're pivoting it, that does not count towards the move of the model. And then when you're finishing pivoting it to show what direction you want it to move, it has to move in a straight line, because it is basically just a big, if you imagine like a big swinging axe is essentially what it is. But this probably is called a pendulum, I don't know, but there's like big tall clock towers that have the big swinging mechanical
pendulums.
Yes. What's it called? Is it called a pendulum? Okay, there we go. Yeah. So it's basically as described on the tin. Okay.
It does look like we have Indiana Jones.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so it can move when set up, and I know I've said that for the last 3 spells, but honestly that is very important, because a lot of people with their predatory spells and whatever end of spell they're using, they presume it can move when it's set up, but they can't. It really is a big difference. So what it does, so after this model has moved, each unit that has any models it passed across, and each other unit that is within 1 inch of it at the end of its move suffers a D6 mortal wounds. So for strengths I put good against elite armies for the mortal wound output, because those elite armies with the good saves, like Bone Reapers, Stormcast, that sort of thing, Slaves of Darkness, I suppose. I've said it's good against low bravery armies. Don't know why I put that. Maybe because of the amount of damage you're going to do. Or I should probably just copy and paste it from the last one. Right, weaknesses, high casting value, and it can hurt you. So again, like the same weaknesses we've seen before. But that has potential to do quite a lot of damage output, doesn't it?
This is my personal favorite out of the box, of the Malignant Sorcery box, because I would even go so far as to remove that weakness, that it can hurt you. It could potentially. You can entirely prevent it by playing appropriately to what it is. As it is, as you say, you have to pivot it when you set it up, and it can only move that way, along its length of the base, in a straight line. It has even been errataed to say that it can only move forward. Meaning that if you position this spell properly, it can never ever harm you. It has free damage.
Can only be
Does
forward,
that mean you can never turn the spell?
But it says you can pivot it and turn it around.
You pivot it when you set it up.
Right.
But you don't pivot it afterwards.
So what happens if you get to a board edge?
That's what the beauty of this spells. Yes, this is the beauty of this spell. If it reaches the board edge, it disappears, meaning you're free to cast it again. So if you want to repeatedly deal that D6 damage and you have enemies close to a board edge, you summon that spell there. It travels over round, and hit the board edge and therefore disappear. And it is no risk to you, because even if your opponent can move it first, it can only move into one direction. And since you would then obviously say, I'm going to go first, it can't hurt me, it's probably disappeared because it hit the board edge, meaning you can summon it again. Repeat. I love it.
Yeah, it is really good. I want to make quick apologies for the guys who are watching this, because I don't know why. It must have been because basically there's a lot of spells here, so I ended up copying and pasting a lot of text, and I put a cast on a 8, but I've actually just checked the War Scroll and it casts on a 6. So while we're talking about things, I will quickly go through my spells just to make sure they are, because I want to have the right information up. Apologies about that. But that's good news. Cast on 6. And like I say, I didn't know that about, it can only move in a straight line, so you can position it right. It reminds me of the sort of like the wave of like iron spikes which the Slaves of Darkness spell has. It sort of just moves in one direction, which is cool. And that's another reason why it's great to have other people on the on the videos, is because there's only so much I know, and I've never used this one. I never fought against this spell, so it's great to hear like little tweaks in the FAQs and stuff like that and the erratas. Because do you say you've taken this in your army, Max?
Yeah, to 2 tournaments so far. I'm playing a very enter-spell heavy local meta, so to say, due to our local tournament rules having 250 points for free on top of your usual army building budget to just allocate for battalions and enter spells. So they're taking quite a lot, and therefore I see a lot of them. And this one is just, when I have 250 points to take it, I'll include this one. It's just so good.
So going back to the sort of question we asked when we did the Purple Sun, this thing may be worth sacrificing that 50-point command point for.
It depends on the army, but at this point I was mostly playing Doomspite Gits, which generate command points
Let us know tomorrow.
like no other. Yeah, they don't need more.
Yeah.
Well, you always need more, but
That's cool. All right. Okay. So that's Pendulums. That's cool. That's out of all the ones we've seen so far, this is probably the most tempting one to take, depending on your army.
I think so. I think it depends again what kind of points you get down left to. You know, whether you want to sort of try and save 50 points just to put a spell in, or whether you're just trying to fill your leftover points with a spell. But this is definitely worth more than the Purple Sun, I reckon.
Yeah, I agree with that one. Okay, so the next one, and this is something that a lot of people talk about. I hear all the time, like competitively. And to be honest, I've had it used against me, but I've never personally ever taken it. Probably just because I haven't got really most of the Ender spells until recently. And this is going to be the Geminids. So this is something that you'll see quite a lot on the competitive scene. It casts on 7+. It's set up wholly within 18 inches of the caster, and then that's essentially you set up one of the models, because again this is an Ender spell with two models. You have one from the Realm of Light, one from the Realm of Shadows. You set one of the models wholly within 18 inches of the caster, and then the second one wholly within 6 inches of the first. So it's predatory. It moves 8 inches. Both models must move within 6 inches of each other, so they always have to stay within 6 inches continuously, essentially. And it can move again, when it is set up. So that's something important to remember, like I mentioned. So what it does, so we have two different things depending on which one we're talking about. If we're talking about the Geminid from the Realm of Shadow or the Geminid from the Realm of Light. So let's start with the Realm of Shadow. So after the Shadow Geminid model has moved, each unit that has any models it passed across suffered D3 mortal wounds. In addition, subtract 1 to a minimum of 1 from the attack characteristic of melee weapons used by each unit that has any models it passed across until the end of the battle round. If playing in the Realm of Shadow, you can re-roll the mortal wound, the D3 from the mortal wounds. Okay, and then for the light, so on the picture here, one's black, one's light. It doesn't really matter which way you paint them. So for the Realm of Light one, so after the Light Geminid model has moved, each unit that has any models it passed across suffer a D3 mortal wounds. In addition, subtract 1 from hit rolls for each unit that has any models it passed across until the end of the battle round. If playing in the Realm of Light this time, re-roll the mortal wound D3. So essentially, one is there to subtract from hit rolls, one is there to subtract from attacks, and they both do mortal wounds. So they are good for debuffing and doing mortal wounds to your enemy. Again, it can hurt and debuff you, and they are 60 points, so not the cheapest. Something I'd like to point out there is, like I said, in the Realm of Shadow, you can roll the D3 for mortal wounds for the black one, and D3 mortal wounds you can re-roll for the Realm of Light for the white one. As Max pointed out earlier, if you're a Cities of Sigmar army, from what we remember, you can re-roll that because you are empowered. So that's something I wish I sort of put on the end of the text as well. So, like I said, this is something that's certainly in England anyway. It's mentioned a lot. What are our thoughts about them?
it's overall a very good spell. But there was a very important FAQ update on this one.
What's that?
That said, I have a localized version here, so I have to translate it loosely. Which pretty much says that a model that has been affected by one of the Geminids ignores the effects of the other. Meaning you cannot double tag the same unit with both of them.
Got you, okay. And, again, apologies that I haven't got all the latest errata and FAQ information on the slides, but I think what's quite good about that, coincidentally, is I'm talking, if chances are if you don't use Ender spells, you're fairly new to 2nd edition of Age of Sigmar, so all you're going to do is read the War Scrolls. So it's quite good that we've got Max here to let us know what has changed, because you do, especially if you're going to tournaments and stuff, you do actually have to do quite a lot of extra looking into FAQs. So that's a bit of an important thing Max has told us there. So the debuffing effect is not quite as good as first thought out.
I think there's also includes the damage part, that you can also only do damage one unit once with one component of the two spells you summon.
Okay.
Because it is worded in such a way that it makes me believe so.
Yeah, I believe you. And it's one of those things where it's important to know that information that's been changed, because with these things always having to be within 6 inches of each other, I imagine, and they're moving 8 inches, I imagine they were crossing over with they were both damaging the same enemy unit quite a lot. They both moved over it, they both debuffed it, they both did mortal wounds, so it's important that you know that they can't do that anymore. But so with that in mind, 60 points, still quite a lot of points for this model, isn't it?
It is, but the debuff ability, the variability, or just you have options. Let me put it this way. English, hard language. You have options. If you face something that hits really hard, you can look which of the debuff effects will help you more mitigate that unit's offensive power. Whether you want to cut down on its attacks, because it has maybe exploding sixes, then you want to definitely cut down on attacks. If it just generally hits hard, maybe that other debuff sounds better to you. Subtracting 1 from hit rolls, I mean, a unit that usually hits on 4s and maybe wounds on 3s can still hurt a lot, but reducing that to hitting on 5s, that unit feels like it's neutered.
Yeah, and like how I read it from what you told me, I imagine you can choose which effect that enemy unit will suffer. You can choose if it will subtract one from hit rolls or from attacks, or is it do we think it is whatever hit it first?
Whatever hit it first.
Okay, but I suppose you can then you can choose what hits it first.
You can move them whichever order you want, so you just pick the one that's more interesting to you.
And in case anyone is asking, like I said at the start of the video, if you go second in the turn, you get to move the first endless spell, because that's usually how endless spells work. You move one and then you alternate between you and your opponent. There's a few on the table. These Geminids count as the same spell, don't they? So you don't move one and then you alternate to your opponent and they move one.
Yeah, they're pretty much just a unit composed of 2 models using that war scroll.
Yeah, cool. Right, okay, so on to the next one. So this is one that I don't really see much either, if I'm honest, and this is a burning head. So
that's a shame, because it's quite a nice model.
It is
Again,
a nice. It is
one
nice.
of the interesting looking ones.
Yeah, it is nice, and something I've realised since blowing up its the picture of it for this PowerPoint is I reckon I could turn that skull into some sort of vampire, a big vampire, but we may see. Yeah, it is a nice model. Right, okay, so how it works: cast on a 7, set up wholly within 3 inches of the caster. It's predatory, so it moves 9, and it can move when it's set up. So what it does, after this model has moved, each unit that has any models it passed across, and each other unit that is within 1 inch of it, and at the end of its move, suffers a D3 mortal wounds, and it's D3 plus 1 if playing in the realm of fire. So the other benefit of this spell is reroll hit rolls of 1 for attacks made by units while they are wholly within 9 inches of this spell. So what I put for strengths is it's good against elite armies purely just for the mortal wounds. It's a very good buff getting that rerolls 1 if your army does not already have that. It's cheap as well for 30 points. Weaknesses, again, it can hurt you, but also with this thing it can also buff the enemy. So if you know you're fighting against an enemy army that is going to get a lot of rerolls to hit anyway, that's not really too much of a problem. But it could be if they don't have that. I mean, I think also, like, I'd say it's got quite a high casting. A 7 is the average on 2 dice, but it never seems to be for me. So I think now that I've got all the inner spells, I will give it a go. But for me, I'd just be conscious on it buffing the enemy as well. What are our thoughts?
This one I usually avoid because with most enter spells you tend to want to cross over enemies to plant it deeply within their ranks in order to avoid them being able to hit you without crossing over their own units. But with this one, doing so will bring you out of range of its buff, but lets you still benefit from it. So this one is difficult to use. Maybe I'm just stupid, but I don't like it.
I think with this one you have to be very careful with your movement of your models and try to find a way to trick the enemy from not being within 9 inches of it. I think you have to put a fair bit of work into movement for something that's not really worth the effort, maybe. I mean, I'd say
on the other hand, you could see it as doing D3 damage to whatever one of your units, or maybe even just putting it somewhere, casting a man point, because what the thing essentially does is all-out attack. You could just cast it and position it somewhere in your ranks, not tag anything with its damage, and just say, oh, well, I'm taking D3 damage as a risk I'm willing to take in order to pretty much have the effect of a free command point. It's a way to look at it, but it feels weird. It feels wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd prefer to take 30 points. I think I'd prefer to take the jaws, to be honest. They just look slightly more fun. It's not much different to cast. I mean, yeah, this is cast on a 7, that cast on an 8. But like you said, this one's quite tricky to use, and the jaws just look more fun.
Definitely.
Yeah, I agree. I'll just say, I don't know, maybe in the Cities of Sigmar, D3 plus 1 mortal wound, minimum of 2 mortal wounds, it's alright, but yeah, I do agree with you guys. Right, so this one has far too much text, the Malignant Maelstorm, for how much this thing costs. Right, so it casts on a 7, you set up it wholly within 18 inches of the caster, it's predatory, so it moves 8. Now, this does not get to move when you set it up. It's an important difference. Right, so if a wizard successfully casts a spell within 12 inches of the Malignant Maelstorm and that spell is not unbound, the Maelstrom will attempt to steal the energies of the spell. Make an additional unbinding roll for that spell. If this unbinding roll is successful, the spell is unbound and 1 energy point is allocated to this model. In addition, one energy point is allocated to this model for each unit destroyed within 6 inches of this model. At the end of each battle round, roll a dice for each Malignant Maelstorm and add the number of energy points allocated to that model to the roll. On a 7+, that Malignant Maelstorm explodes. Each unit within 3d6 inches of the model that exploded suffers D3 mortal wounds. The model that exploded is then dispelled. If your battle was taking place in the realm of death, allocate 1 additional energy point to this model at the start of each battle round. So essentially this thing is a bomb, hence why I've called it Hiroshima. So essentially it will explode at some point and do a lot of damage, or it won't, and it won't really do anything. So its strengths is, I said, it's incredibly cheap. As far as I'm aware, it's the cheapest spell. It's going to cost you 10 points. So many army lists, you end up with 10 points left over, you know, if you wanted to chuck it in. It's another way to stop magic. If you don't really have many wizards in your army, well, if you don't have many wizards in your army, then you're probably not going to be casting it, to be fair. Potential to dish out a lot of mortal wounds, but potentially not. Weaknesses, it can hurt you and debuff you, and it's got a high chance of not going off. When I say it can debuff you, is that, you know, it can try to unbind you. Right, this thing, the biggest strength is it only costs 10 points, am I right?
Yeah.
Mostly, yeah. Also, I mean, there's some armies which just ally in a single wizard for the one purpose of shutting down important spells. For those types of armies, this is something you might want. It's not much, it isn't guaranteed to help, but it could. Let's say you play, I don't know, I'm not sure. Do Fire Slayers have an innate ability to shut down magic? I don't think so. So
Ooh,
let's say you ally in a single wizard. And being able to cast that spell in your hero phase, when its entire purpose is to shut down other magic, why not?
Yeah, it's another way you can do it. Can your Cowden Overlords stop magic?
They can. They have Skypod that's especially good at doing so. They have the Navigator, which can shut down magic.
Okay, I was going to say, because if they didn't have a standard way, they could try and set this up. But yeah, so it's cheap. If you've got 10 points left over and you've got the spell and you've never tried it before, give it a go and see how you do. Right, next one. So this is the Suffocating Gravetide. So how it works, it casts on a 6+. You set up wholly within 6 inches of the caster. It's predatory, so it moves 8 inches, or it moves 12 inches in the realm of death. It can move when set up. So what it does, so after this model has moved, each unit that has any models it passed across suffers D3 mortal wounds. In addition, subtract 1 from the bravery characteristic of each unit that has any models it passed across until the end of the battle round. When a missile weapon targets a unit that has all of its models within 1 inch of this model, the target unit receives the benefit of cover if the attacking unit is closer to this model than it is to the target unit. So strengths, it's only going to cost you 20 points, so I've put it's very cheap. Good against elite armies just because the mortal wound output potentially. It's good against low bravery armies as well, helps again towards a bravery bomb if you want to do that. I put weaknesses, it can hurt you and it can debuff you as well. It does not discriminate with this -1 to bravery. I don't really see this a lot. It's I sort of look at this and I think if you want to try and make the enemy an extra -1 to bravery, that's probably the main reason why you take it, or if you're going against a lot of shooting for 20 points.
I'm kind of undecided on this one. I'm having one in my hands right now. It's a really big base, so it's very great at blocking movement, and it's cheap for 20 points. It's a cheap way for 20 points to do D3 mortal wounds semi-reliably. Of course, it could backfire like most other spells could. It's great for blocking movement, so it has a dual purpose in that way. Debuffing bravery is nice, but the last ability, the cover, I would completely ignore that because it's bad at what it wants to do. It wants to be between your unit and the enemy unit in order to provide cover. It wants to be right in front of the enemy unit. But then again, you would want to charge enemy shooting units, wouldn't you? You can do that with a big fat wall in front of them.
Yeah, I think for like early game maybe.
Maybe. Or if you both have shooting lines just facing one another, but
yeah,
I would take it mostly for the large base and for the ability to do just D3 mortal wounds over and over again for just 20 points.
I'd give it a go as well. Like when I've when I start playing games again, when all this is over, I will give it a go. I think for 20 points, it's worth a shot.
I think for blocking movement and stuff, I think 20 points is quite a good price to pay for that. I mean, people spend quite a lot more on chaff units, don't they? So it's cheap chaff unit, really, isn't it? If you can get it off.
Yeah.
To some extent.
The only thing to bear in mind is that because it only casts on a 6, it's quite easy for the enemy to unbind and get rid of it.
Yeah, but then at the very least it eats up a spell that potentially could be way more valuable than whatever else spell you could have cast in your hero phase instead of this one.
Yeah.
So that's just something to think about.
Cool.
It still adds something that their wizards have got to deal with, doesn't it?
Yeah, and most players, in my experience, forget that they can even do that. Most people just endure the mortal wounds and just completely forget that they could remove these things fairly easily. It's a psychological thing. It looks like a solid model on the field.
Yeah,
they just forget it.
I've heard that, and when you remind your opponent, sometimes they go like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that," and it's like, "Oh God, I should remind you now." But like, you can deal with it, especially how depending on your army, you can. And there's a lot of armies out there now can build to have a lot of casters in, so you can do it. Right, so move on to the next one. So we've got the Quicksilver Swords, or better known as the Racist Swords, because they're very good against Chaos. So how it works, so it casts on a 6. You set up wholly within 10 inches of the caster. It's predatory, so it moves 8 or 12 in the realm of... Don't know if that was right, hang on a sec. So it can move when set up. So what it does is after this model is moved, you can pick one unit within 6 inches of it and roll 12 dice. For each roll of a 6, that unit suffers 1 mortal wound. If the unit being rolled for is a Chaos unit, it suffers 1 mortal wound for each roll of a 5+ instead, hence the racist part. If your battle has taken place in the realm of metal, you can roll 15 dice for this model, Dancing Blades ability instead of 12. So strengths, I said, good against elite armies, but particularly if you're fighting Chaos, good against that. It's a way to try and hopefully piss off a Keeper of Secrets. Weaknesses, it can hurt you again, and I would say don't take it if your army is Chaos, because you don't really want this to be used against you. I'm just looking at the movement, guys, because I'm pretty sure that's wrong. But in the meantime, what are your guys' thoughts on this spell?
I hate it.
You hate it?
I think it's the only enter spell that has the potential of doing 0 damage.
Why'd you hate
Because it doesn't guarantee you damage. You roll 12 dice, and every 6 is a mortal wound. Statistically, it will do 2 mortal wounds, but it might as well just do 0. It's too unsafe. It's too unreliable, in my opinion.
Against Chaos, it can do horrific things.
Against Chaos, maybe, but there's like 2 things about that. When you go to a tournament and you have to prepare your list, you can guarantee you going up against Chaos. And when you play against friends or narrative or just fun games, you'd be a dick to bring that into a Chaos game.
Or you just go, oh, I didn't realise you were taking your Chaos army, and your opponent just goes, but I only have Chaos.
Like,
I forgot. Sorry.
Like, oh no, I didn't know it could do that. I'm playing this so rarely. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Sorry, just one thing to say about it. It does move 8 inches. It just doesn't do the Realm of Death thing. That's from the other spell. But yeah, so...
I don't like the look of the model, to be honest. I think this is going to be a nightmare to paint. I look at that and just think, oh.
Yeah,
it's one of them.
I made mine out of... My mate decided to play Chaos non-stop for a few months, so I decided to make my own out of Hexray Scythes, just to do the whole, sorry, didn't realise you're playing Chaos. Yeah.
On a more positive note, I think it has so far one of the smallest bases for the spells, so you will never really have any issue with fitting it somewhere. So that's nice, I suppose.
Certainly one of the easiest to convert, that's for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, whatever is the main weapon for your faction, just use that. I imagine if you've got a Seraphon army, just use those like gold hacking sort of weapons the Sauruses have. That's not the name of the Aztec weapon, but that sort of thing. Right, moving on.
Funnily enough, I think you could really make this look very chaosy, even though it is meant against chaos due to all the skull parry blades.
Yeah,
you could paint this like Hellblades and it would look very much chaosy. But it would hurt you more.
In that case, with the Hellblades, Khorne does not care where the blood comes. So, for the next one, we have got Emerald Life Swarm. So, how it works, it casts on a 6+. You set up wholly within 15 inches of the caster. It's predatory, so it moves 10 inches. What it does, after this model is set up, or after it has moved, pick one unit within 1 inches of it. You can either heal D3 wounds that have been allocated to that unit, or if no wounds are currently allocated to the unit, you may return a number of slain models to it that have a combined wound characteristic equal to or less than the roll of a D3. If you're playing in the realm of life, it's a D6. So strengths, obviously good for healing. Also, it's great to return slain models for this army that hasn't, like, for an army that doesn't have any other way of doing it. I'm thinking like Cities of Sigmar. Obviously, this is empowered, so you're getting D6 anyway, and you could use it to bring back Phoenix Guard, that sort of thing, which are very tough anyway. And then, like, weaknesses, the enemy can use it to heal return models too. What are our thoughts? It's also, just say it's 50 points, so it's the same price as a command point.
I'm not a fan. I could see why someone would use it, but maybe I just don't play the armies that would benefit from this one the most, which would be single wound models with high save values and or save after saves. Shrugs, death saves, whatever. But I don't like it due to it might just be way more beneficial to your opponent than yourself.
I mean, let's say this is in your list, yeah? And you end up fighting against a Cities of Sigmar player. And you take the priority, they move this spell, and they use it to bring back D6 for their own Phoenix Guard that you've just spent ages trying to kill.
Yeah, with 4-up armor and 4-up save after save.
Yeah,
a lot of fun.
I think you would be annoyed that you spent 50 points for the pleasure of seeing your opponent do that right in front of you.
So maybe take this spell if you have Phoenix Guard, but not if you're fighting Phoenix Guard.
Yeah, exactly. I think if you've got Pacific Army builds, this could be good. But generally, no. Yeah, cool. Because it is 50 points at the end of the day, so it was a command point. Right, the next one, and this one's actually 40 points. So this is a set of Soul Snare Shackles. So how it works, cast on a 5, set up wholly within 12 inches of the caster. Then, so basically there are 3 models here for this spell. You set up the first one wholly within 12 inches of the caster, then the others wholly within 6 inches of at least one of the other models from the spell, or it can be wholly within 9 inches if in the realm of metal. So what does it do? So it's a little bit different. So at the start of your movement phase, roll a dice for each unit within 6 inches of any Soul Snare Shackles. Models on a 3 plus half the move characteristic of that unit until the end of that phase. On a 6, and that unit also suffers a D3 mortal wound. So strength's good against elite armies, just purely for the mortal wounds. And then I've also said great to debuff your enemy's movement. Weaknesses can hurt and debuff you. Now, like I say, I've only just got all the blind sorcery spells. I really want to try this out because I think 40 points to half the enemy movement. It's not guaranteed, but on a 3+ it's not hard for it to go off, and its low casting value means you're probably going to be able to summon it. What are our thoughts?
This one of those fun ones to use. One of those fun spells.
This one is, in my opinion, one of the best in the box. It used to be 20 points, and it went up in points because people figured out how to abuse it.
Well, 20 points.
You have the flexibility of placing... Yeah, it used to be 20, but now it's... Yeah. Because you have the flexibility of setting up 3 decently shaped bases. Which means you can do...
As well, so yeah.
You can do quite a few things. For example, you could space those in a way that models of a particular size cannot fit through. And since this spell is the first one we have reviewed so far that is not predatory, I just want to state it. Once this spell is cast, it does not move. It stays in place no matter what, unless it is unbound, dispelled, whatever you want to call it.
So that means
it stays where you put it.
So you set up perfectly to try and annoy your enemy as much as possible, and then the enemy can't deliberately move it closer to you and try to use it against you. The only way you're going to trip up on this, when I say it can hurt or debuff you, is if you have to move next to where you set up, essentially.
Yes, and it's also capable of pulling off a very unique. Let's just call it dig move. It's a dig move, which many opponents are gonna really pout when you're gonna do it. Think of a large base monster, preferably on an oval-shaped base. You position the first one towards the front of the base, slightly towards the left. Not quite where the base is at its widest, but slightly in front of that.
I see what
And
you
the other, you mirror that with the other one and place the last one right in the back. All three in base contact. This way, since enter spells are treated as friendly models, if this big model does not have fly, it is trapped there. If your opponent says no, it can clearly move, then challenge him to move that thing without lifting it off the table, without moving your enter spells.
What I'd say of that is I think the best monster to use it against, potentially, is a Helper Abomination, because that's a large oval base, and it moves 2d6. So it could be hell for a Skaven player. The Skaven player goes, I've brought my free modelled Vortex. Cool, I've brought my Shackles. Use it against a Screaming Bell.
Oh yeah.
See if it can move.
That's just...
Yeah, okay. Well, you
Right,
said...
guys.
Yeah.
I've got to bail out now, but
no.
I will be definitely picking up one of these boxes, I think, to be honest, for when I get playing.
Awesome, mate. I was
Been
gonna
a
say,
big help.
no worries at all. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm glad to hear that you're going to think about picking up a box of these. Do you understand the spells a little bit more than you did before?
Yeah, I've got a much better view of what they are now. Obviously, I'd like to go through some more, and I'll probably catch the rest of your video later.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, definitely, it's been a big help, especially just understanding how they're set up on the tabletop and how they're meant to work upon the tabletop. I mean, obviously, all spells are different, but once you've got an idea of how one's going to play out, you've got an idea of how they all sort of work to some degree.
Absolutely, and that's sort of what I wanted to get across. Like I said, I was put up by Endless Spells for ages, but once you understand the fundamentals, that they're not too hard. And for example, the ones from Line Sorcery, a lot of the damage dealing ones, a lot of them are just if they move over an enemy model, they can do damage to that unit. A lot of them work quite similar. But anyway, I'll let you get going, buddy. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm glad you found something useful. You got any questions or anything for you or anyone who's watching this? Put them in the comments down below, and I'll be happy to help you as best I can. So anyway, mate, have a good rest of your evening.
You too. Catch you later.
See you later, mate. Cool. Max, you still with us?
Yes.
Brilliant. Yeah, this spell is... I've only seen it once on the table, and it was used against me on a Game 5 at a Warhammer World Tournament. I was actually on the top tables, and then after this game, where the opponent used this against me, and I didn't really know what it did, I was no longer on the top tables because it was a good example of why you have to know your endless spells. Like I said, me and my buddy was put off using endless spells for about a year when second edition came out, and a tournament we went to Warhammer World forced us to learn them, and this was that tournament. And because I didn't really know this one, it reminded me, just because you might not be taking endless spells, it's important for you to understand what they do, because of course you need to roll 3 up to affect the enemy's movement, but it's massive.
It is far more effective as a wall than for its ability.
Yeah.
Because you could just paint a dotted line, and whatever doesn't fit in between the dots just has to stay out unless the enemy spends a spell to remove that thing. Which is fairly easy, granted, but you might not have that many wizards.
No, it's something I would love to do, like in a perfect storm situation. Let's say you're playing Deepkin and you were fighting against a Flesh Eater Court army with all the Terrorgeist and everything else. You get your ritual off to make the Flesh Eater Court army not be able to fly for the rest of the game, and you set these things up.
They would probably be quite mad. I'm not sure if you... I think with perfectly round bases, it's not quite as easy to set them up perfectly that the opponent cannot move, but it's still possible due to the Terrorgeist being on perfectly round bases. Yeah, this can be very infuriating if they don't want to spend the magic on being rid of this.
Yeah, I think for 40 points, it's definitely going to be something I try. for sure. And it'll be one of those things where I'll probably give it I'll maybe try it 3 times. So like the first and second time, you might have completely different results of how well it did, and then the third time sort of rules out the anomalies and hopefully gives you a more balance of how it works. So I will be running this a lot just to try and make it work best I can. Right, on to the next one. So this one is the Chromantic Cogs. I think I'm pronouncing right. I think I pronounced the cogs bit right at least.
I think it's chronomantic. I think.
Crone is actually more of how it's written as well. So I presume that is right.
Chrono for the ancient. What was it, Greek for time? I think. Or it was Latin. I have no idea. I'm an idiot. So I just mean it means time. Chrono.
I mean, you narrowed it down to 2 languages, which is more than I could have done. But no. So yeah. So it's about time, and we'll get to that. And this is a spell where even if you're very new to Ender spells, you may have heard of people using this because it is one of the most useful. Firstly, this thing's costing you 80 points, so one of the most expensive ones, if not the most expensive, or it might be joint, we'll see. So how it works, so it casts on 7, you set up wholly within 12 inches of the caster. Now it's got a fair few abilities, so we'll go into them. So what it does: in their controlling player's hero phase, a single wizard within 9 inches of this model may manipulate the cogs to increase or decrease the flow of time. They may do this in the same phase as the chromantic cogs are set up. If they do so, choose one of the effects opposite. The effect lasts until their next hero phase or until an enemy wizard chooses to manipulate the cogs. So you have 2 ways you can manipulate this. So option number 1 is speed up time, which is one of the most popular ones. So add 2 inches to the move characteristics of all units on the battlefield. In addition, add 2 to the charge rolls for all units on the battlefield. Then you can slow down time. The wizard manipulating the cogs can cast 1 additional spell in your hero phases. In addition, reroll save rolls for that wizard. So the strengths I've put is, like I sort of mentioned at the start when I'm talking about this, one of the best spells in my opinion. It is a great way to speed up a slow army, or to make a fast army even faster, or help for deep striking or alpha striking. And that's obviously for alpha striking plus into your movement and charge. But for deep striking, most deep striking things have to be 9 inches away from the enemy when they're set up. Now with this, you're making it 7 inches away from the enemy. If you deep strike with a hero as well, you can re-roll that with a command point, unless you're Bone Reapers. And then for weaknesses, I've put the enemy will benefit from the 2+ to move if you do speed up time, massively. And that can be something to bear in mind, especially if you're going to a tournament and you don't know what armies you're fighting, and suddenly you've come across a 27 eel army from the Deepkin. Giving them the extra movement is not good at all. And then the last weakness I said is expensive. It does also help the wizard out though if you choose to slow down time, obviously with the extra cast and the reroll save rolls. So, like I say, very popular spell. What are your thoughts on this one, Max?
Yeah, it's one of the most popular for a reason. The speeding up is definitely great. Both parts of the ability are great, but if you just take it for the additional spell, keep in mind that you might as well just take the Balewind Vortex, because this thing is kind of like an anchor to your mage, because your mage is going to want to stay within that 9 inches of it.
Yeah, so for a wizard who doesn't mind staying at the back,
for that type of wizard, it's absolutely fine, but like I said, if you just want an extra spell, since you're anchoring down your wizard with this anyway, then there's a cheaper option. But if you want the flexibility of having both, perfect, take it. It's good.
Yeah, what I'd say is most people take this for the +2 to your move characteristic and to the charging. But if you don't want to speed up time because you are just worried that the enemy's going to benefit from the speed up time more than you are, you can just slow down time. You're still going to benefit from it. You're still not going to think you completely wasted 80 points. It's nice how it's got basically a like a super drive option, and then like a safer, slower option. You know, it's like when you're driving a car, you can drive it so you can get the max performance out of it, or you can make it so it's eco-friendly. So yeah, and it's quite an interesting looking spell as well.
Oh yeah. Also, it probably would be one of my favorite spells if ogres could get their charge damage on modified dice rolls for the charge, but sadly not.
Absolutely, it's the same with Nighthaunt. If I could make this trigger the attack in the combat, attack in the charge phase as well ability easier,
Yeah,
would
be so good.
Hence why you see, for all charge abilities and everything else now, hence why you always see on a like unmodified roll of whatever, it's because things like this exist. Cool. So let's move on to the next one, which again is one you would have almost heard as much as the cogs, and this is the Umbral, whatever how it's pronounced, spell portal. So again, this has 2 models for it this time, 2 like identical mirrors. It is 70 points, so expensive. It casts on a 5. You set up wholly within 12 inches of the caster, and then you set up the second mirror wholly within 18 inches of the first mirror, or if you're playing in the Realm of Shadow, anywhere on the board. So what it does, if a wizard successfully casts a spell while they are within 1 inch of an Umbral spell portal model, the range and visibility of the spell can be measured from the other Umbral spell portal model from this Ender spell. If a predatory Ender spell finishes a move within 6 inches of an Umbral spell portal model, remove it from the battlefield and set it up again anywhere within 6 inches of the other Umbral spell portal model from this endless spell. So strengths, I said, is I would refer this as one of the best spells, certainly has been for me, purely because like great and really good wizards with short range spells.
It is Nagash's Boop portal.
It is Nagash's Hand of Dust, which is the 50-50 wipe out an enemy model, which was like, oh, it's good, but you have to get within 3-inch range, so it's quite hard. And then basically this is like, it's almost like Games Workshop was saying to like Nagash, going like, when they've released all these endless spells, going like, Nagash, you're my favourite child, here's your weakness now gone. And now Hand of Dust, which was a 3-inch range, is now a 24-inch range with this spell. Or if you're playing in the Realm of Shadows,
have to imagine.
Yeah, if you're playing in the Realm of Shadows, it's unlimited. I have I don't want to say I've abused this spell, but I would be lying if I say they were not the words of my opponent. My opponents have said I've abused this spell, but you know, it's all fun.
I always like to imagine Nagash, like hand just poking out of the other end of the portal, just like booping the opponent on the nose, and he crumbles to dust.
It is great. So for weaknesses, I said it is expensive. You know, it's 70 points, and you can only cast 1 spell through the spell portal. So for Nagash, depending on your list, I'd say it's still worth taking. Like it is. Well, when I was going to tournaments, this was an auto include for my Nagash list, just because you've got a 24-inch range, 50-50 wipe out any model the enemy has, and most tournament armies, or most armies you fight, do have like a big nasty monster in them, purely because people who I completely agree with, they want a big centerpiece for their army, so being able to remove that centerpiece turn 1 is a great way to remind your opponent you don't have any friends. So I think it's good, but I'm slightly biased because I've got the best guy to use the spell for. So for someone who doesn't play Nagash, what do you think about it, Max?
It's still very good. It's though a bit expensive. Of course, spellcasters which have very powerful, very low range spells benefit the most from this one. But it can still be useful to other mages because it can act as an antennae to pretty much extend the range of whatever it is you want to do, whether it be buffs, debuffs, damaging spells, whatever. It helps, but make sure your army benefits from the range extension sufficiently to justify 70 points.
Yeah, exactly. And what I'd also say, just to remember about the spell, is you have to be within 1 inch of it. And as far as I'm aware, it does not move.
Yes, that one is also stationary. Also, your opponent can do the same thing from the other end.
Yep, they can cast a spell back at you. If you're playing against another Nagash and you fail to hand to dust it, you can guarantee they'll try and do the same back to you. And then like another, just a little thing. Remember, you can also use the visibility from that spell portal as well. So if you put it, if you're trying to hit something that's behind an enemy, well, not an enemy, but a massive terrain feature, if you put a spell like kind of on the other corner of the terrain feature, so that portal can see the enemy, then you can use its visibility. So it is good. Yeah, it's one of the most popular ones.
Since you've been using it the most, I have a question for you because I'm not quite sure if that works the way I imagine it does.
I think this is the question that I'm going to ask you as well, but go on.
It's
Let's do event spells.
Some spells affect every unit with an X of the spellcaster, and since the text says you can measure the effect of all spells from the portal, would that also work with these type of aura effects that, like, until your next hero phase, all units within 12 of the caster, or in this case, the portal, have -1 to hit or +1 to hit or whatever? Does this actually work? I'm not sure.
Okay, so 100% I don't know, but in how I would look at it, I would look at it as it says. If a wizard successfully casts a spell while they are within 1 inch of the spell portal, the range and visibility of the spell can be measured through the spell portal. So I would say you choose. You choose to fire it through the spell portal or not.
Because it's this paradox of around the caster.
Yeah, I know.
When you can measure the range of
there's Soul
from the
Harvest
portal.
for Legions and Nagash. I think it's called Soul Harvest. Enemy units within 3 inches of your model suffer D3 wounds. For how many wounds they suffer on 5s up, you get to heal back. So it's a blast effect from the base of the model. So if this guy was within 1 inch of the spell portal, would the blast also go into the other side of the spell portal? I would say no. I would personally say it's more sensible to say no.
It's always sensible again versus rules as written.
Yeah, and play
sometimes
and someone who's using the spell portal, as myself, if I'd said sensibly no, that's a negative against me. So like, I'm not trying to say whoever's the most powerful for the person using the spell portal. I think. And like, it's in a real life situation, it's hard to tell how much magic would travel through a magical mirror. But like, do you sort of see where I'm coming from? It feels like it should just stay on one side of the spell portal or the other. If you said, right, I cast a spell that is the aura ability, like it does the blast, but I'm going to cast it through the spell portal, would that mean that I would measure, like, whatever the blast effect is around that spell portal instead of the model who cast it? I would say that's more likely a yes compared to what we just talked about.
Because it would mean you treat the range is from the caster, but you treat in this case the spell portal as the caster because you measure the range of the spell, which is range of caster, from the spell portal, which is just a mess.
It says the range and visibility of the spell can be measured from the other umbral spell portal. So I'd say so to answer the question, I'd say it's one or the other. So you either do like the aura blast ability from the wizard, or you do it from the other spell portal. Not both.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I think it would be decided.
Probably.
If my opponent was using this against me and they said I get to do it from my model and I get to do it from the spell portal as well, I would probably have a little bit of an argument. Because it just doesn't seem right to me. Right, The question I was going to ask you, which I thought might have been the same, but it's not. So, if you move a end of spell within 6 inches of it, it teleports to the other spell, yeah?
Yes, you can you can redeploy it there. Yes.
You can redeploy. It does not finish a move there, does it?
Well, when it finishes a move around one of the portals, so it's finished, you redeploy it towards the other, but its move is still finished.
Exactly. So, like, for example, if I had the Gnash and Jaws, and it finished moving within 6 inches of one spell portal, so it teleports to the other, that does not, and like say there's an enemy unit within 1 inch of the portal which is teleported through, it would not damage that enemy unit, the one that, because it's redeployed. Not finished the move.
Yeah,
it's redeployed.
To my knowledge, it wouldn't.
It wouldn't.
To my knowledge, it wouldn't.
Yeah. That because I had someone who asked me that question, and I didn't really know the answer, but I agreed with you, and they thought otherwise, and I was like, it's redeployed. It's not a move.
I think the key here is to look when it says when it finishes a move. Where this part of the sentence is within the text of the ability, I think this is the deciding factor in determining the order of things. Because when a thing finishes its move, you measure its damage, there's nothing. Then, after this is finished, you redeploy it. That's how I would argue it.
Yeah, it's one of... I think in the game, and it's the same with all games, isn't it? I personally think if you're the person who's trying to find such a tiny loophole to try and use an ender spell to teleport through a portal to do its end of move damage wherever it's just redeployed to, if you try and find those tiny little loopholes that allow you to do things like that, I kind of feel like you're the person like who's in the wrong about how it works because you're the one trying to abuse it.
Then you're that guy that people make videos over. That guy at your local store.
Yeah, exactly. You can be referred to that guy, which is great. If you don't want people ever uttering your name, that's brilliant. If you've got 2 Bens in the store or something like that, or, I don't know, 2 Alexes or 2, Mikeys, it's good if you have one who is the arsehole, because then you can say that, the other guy, so it's really easy to, that guy to establish. But, no. I think we talked about this one for the longest so far, but I think that's important because there's a lot of... This is one of the most unique ones.
Yeah, many arguments in Age of Sigmar are about the order of things regarding the intricacy of rules. Yeah. What happens first and which order does what trigger.
Definitely.
So
with that, we'll go on to the next one. So this is a lot cheaper. This is going to be the Prismatic Palisade.
Yes.
30 points. How it works: it casts on a 5. You set up wholly within 18 inches of the caster. What it does: so at the start of each turn, roll a dice for each unit within 6 inches of this model. On a 5+, subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made by that unit until the end of the turn. Add 1 to the roll if in the realm of light. A model cannot see another model if an imaginary straight line 1 millimeter wide drawn from the center of its base to the center of the other model's base passes over this model. Essentially blocks line of sight. So strength's a great way to shut down enemy shooting and enemy flanking, and it's cheap. So I've used this spell a couple of times. I love it, and I'll be honest, it's for its sort of classed as main ability to subtract 1 from enemy hit rolls. That's only gone off once. The reason I love this spell is just to go, right, I'm going to shut down this flank. Because of the size of the model's base, if there's quite a bit of terrain on the board, you can really just, if the enemy can't fly, you can just shut. You can basically make like a mousetrap for your enemy.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love this spell. Also, since it blocks line of sight, keep in mind that also affects spellcasters.
Yes.
So you might be able to isolate some immobile spellcasters for a turn, or otherwise they would have to remove that thing, which, again, few people do, because especially with that thing, because it's not a threat, it's just in the way.
Definitely. And it's And one of the biggest bonuses I say about it is 30 points. So I don't know how it's just happened to how I build my list, but I quite often are left with 40 or 30 points, and I go, yeah, I'll chuck that one in. It's great. And so what I have put for weaknesses, though, of course it can debuff you with the -1 to hit. You don't want to set this up right next to your models to block an enemy charge. You want to have it a little bit further away, so you're not within that 6. And if you are using it to try and make the enemy -1 to hit, it's not, because you need to do it on a 5-up. I would not say it's a reliable enough to get it off.
Yeah. I think to like really hammer home the point of how good these wall type and movement blocking capabilities of enter spells are is to reiterate to our new players that in Age of Sigmar, the games are 5 rounds. That means you have maximum 5 movement phases. And if one of them is spent walking around that thing, you took away one of the enemy phases.
Yeah. Which is great. And like something, not that a lot of ender spells do this, but again with this spell, it's not like you have to set this up 12 inches away from every enemy unit or something. You can literally just, if the enemy's like right on you and then you have a turn to intercept their charge or something, and you don't really have anything to countercharge, you can just go right, block, enjoy walking around the building. And
this thing has a very long base.
Yes, very long. And unless the enemy's got a wizard to unbind it, they're kind of stuck. And the other thing is, if the enemy doesn't bind it, they've used one of their spells to get rid of something that costs 30 points. And I think why I love this spell is just that it's so easy to control. Like, you set it up, it's not going to come back and hit you in the face. It's just, you set up and you just leave it and you go, right, that's that side of that's that little a vantage point the enemy could attack me from that I don't have to worry about now. Don't get me wrong, if the enemy can fly, they can fly with this thing. But
oftentimes it's just enough to like delay the opponent from attacking that weakly defended victory point that you need to win. That's so valuable. Of course, flying, yeah.
But I think because I'm used to playing like Flesh Eater Court armies that fly and stuff, but a lot of armies don't actually fly, so it's not too bad. So that is the Prismatic Palisade. Right, okay, so we're going to go into Forbidden Power. Before, I'm going to stop and save that recording before we move on. Okay, so now that we've looked at Malign Sorcery, which is the main sort of expansion to get your owner spells, we are now going to look at Forbidden Power, which was essentially the sequel to that box. Well, it hasn't got as many in the spells in there, but some still veteran ones. Right, so going into our first one we're going to look at, and this is going to be, I'm going to get the name wrong again, Lucon, the Soul Seeker. What is his actual name?
I have Lacon. Don't ask me. I'm the foreigner.
It's a French name. Just wait for someone to tell me it's not a French name, but you know, it's a. What's the actual name of the?
You people had to defend them, hadn't you?
What's that?
You just had to defend them. You wouldn't have to deal with this.
Who's the in like mythology who takes you across the River Styx? Whatever it's called, the in the underworlds in Hades. There's the guy who ferries the souls.
Yep, that bloke. The
right,
one that takes 2 coins.
Yeah, I spent far too much time trying to find like the backstory behind the inspiration of this model. Right, okay, so how it works. It casts on a 6. You set up wholly within 12 inches of the caster. It's predatory, so you know, lock up your kids. It moves 12 inches and it can move when set up. So what does it do? So before a player makes a move with this model, that player can pick a friendly unit wholly within 3 inches of this model. Remove that unit and place it to one side after this model has moved. Set that unit up again wholly within 3 inches of this model and more than 9 inches away from enemy units. Once that unit has been set up, one model from that unit is immediately slain. So strengths are great for movement, especially if you can move the unit that's been teleported after it's teleported. So, great for movement. Weaknesses, one model must die and pay his tithe. So, if you really want to move your Morgos Archive unit across the board, don't do it by this, because you don't want to give away like a 6-wound model. But if it is Grots, you don't mind one of them dying, do you, I imagine?
The problem with Grots is fitting them wholly within 3.
I was going to say, I literally just crossed my eyes and checked that, and I was like, so it's not great for like massive hordes, but it's not great for super elite things, so...
Yeah, that's why I personally dislike the spell. It is good at moving things that you don't mind dying, but the requirement of it being wholly within 3 lends itself more towards more elite units you don't want to die.
Yeah, it's like, I remember someone asking me about the spell when it came out. They said, can I move a hero with it? And I was kind of like, I think you can move a hero with it, but he is immediately killed at the end.
You move him towards the underworld, so...
Yeah, it's kind of along the lines of, you're in a foreign country, you've been out in the evening, you get back to your hotel with the taxi, you get to the hotel and you go like, you realise you haven't actually got any money on you. And you go, and you're just looking around because it's a foreign taxi, you are seeing probably a machete rather than a baseball bat, and you think, well, this is the end. Here's my Lucon, the Soul Seeker, come to reap my soul.
It's more like you notice he's driving past your hotel and the doors are locked, and so are the windows.
He is. Something else I just want to point out about this model, it has like a complete skull on the front of it from the giant kit. So it's a fantastic. It's one of the, for me, it's one of the coolest looking endless spells.
It is definitely good looking. I don't like the way the boat is made of this like tiny skulls. It's a bit too repetitive for me. I think they should have broken up the surface of the boat, like the hull of it.
Yeah, I mean, the skulls are not on the inside; it's planks of wood, so that's a little bit different. I'd say Games Workshop do not put as much thought into their ender spells as they do with their normal models. It's like the fire, the Fire Slayer unique prayer that looks very similar to the Palisades, and just some runes chucked on it. But so this
I feel this box is a especially hard case of that, I think, because most of the things could have been looking great, but they just missed the mark.
Yeah, it's so I've got this box and I've only cracked it open to read the book and to cut up one of the spells to make a corpse cut. I'm yet to actually use the spells from it. I think that's probably because when I got it I was still scared of using any spells, so I may get to use them at some point. But this is going to cost you 60 points, so more than a command point. I think for some very specific lists you could probably make it work very well, but for most cases, not good. It's not worth it. It sounds good, but then when you think like you have to be wholly within 3 inches of it, you have to sacrifice a model. It's 60 points as well, so it's a bit of a hard sell.
Yeah, it's bad at what it wants to do.
Can you fit 60 grots within 3 inches of this model?
No.
Can you fit 40 off the top of your head?
I don't think so. Maybe 30.
Yeah, and like at that point, like, do you really want to be putting 30 through here?
Yeah, especially when there's a way better alternative in the exact same box.
Yes, there is. I'll be interested to see if you put like, I don't know, 30 Graveguard for it, because they have small bases and they're elite and they're only 1 wound, but we'll see. Right, so the next model is going to be the Horrorghast, which is the big Nagash head. I'm not a massive, surprisingly, this is Asian Nagash. I'm not a massive fan of the aesthetics of the model. Purely because I feel like it's an insult to Nagash, but more along the lines of it looks like someone's got Nagash's head and then they've left it on the stove for a bit too long.
I would much rather see this as being more Night Houndy than Nagash says hello.
Yeah.
Because this thing is a bravery bomb. And this doesn't look all that scary.
No, it's like... So I'll go through... So essentially the lore behind that sort of thing is basically they feast on terror, which they inflict, and they often take the form of Nagash, the Great Necromancer, to try and fear the enemy. If this thing turned into the head of a Morgul, I'd find that more scarier. So how it works, it casts on a 6+. It's set up wholly within 12 inches of the caster. It's predatory, so it moves 9 inches or 12 inches in the realm of death. What it does, subtract 1 from the bravery characteristics of units while they are within 12 inches of this model. Subtract 2 from instead from the bravery characteristics of units while they are within 6 inches of this model. So strengths, like you've already mentioned, great to help towards a bravery bomb. Weaknesses, it can debuff you too. But it's if you really want to, like you were saying, stack up the minus the bravery for your enemy to try and deal with in a bomb for the battle shot phase, or to use against a terror, well, with your terror guys, that sort of thing. This is one of the best spells to use for it. I've put that it's 60 points. I just want to check to make sure it is 60 points. I feel that's a little bit too expensive.
I think it is.
It is, yeah.
Which I think it is, which is why it isn't that good. I mean, it is for one allegiance. It is pretty much the signature spell of the Legion of Grave, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because this Legion lives off of battle shock tests.
Yeah.
Or rather, kills with battle shock tests.
The only problem
However,
sorry, I was just going to say
the big.
Sorry, I keep cutting you off. I do apologise. I'll let you talk.
The big problem this spell has is that bravery is the only thing it does, and with the things being as they are, everyone is gonna keep a command point around to inspiring presence, what's precious to them, when they know you have that thing.
I mean, especially, you know, like if you end up fighting like Gloomspite Gits, like you said, and they got command points for days, really, they'll just go inspiring presence. What you need to take is Legion of Grief with Kurdos the Craven King, and then
to steal command points.
Steal enough command points from your opponents so they can't use it, or take the Banshee Battalion from Nighthaunt to make your opponent not be able to do inspiring presence. So it really does lend itself to Nighthaunt if that's what you want to go for. And aesthetically, it's very Nighthauntish as well.
Question though, can the Legion of Grief use Nighthaunt battalions?
Why are you asking me this? I think I think like really obscure stuff. I'm gonna say yes, but I don't really know. I know they can include things in the army that have the Nighthaunt keyword.
But it's weird because it's a whole different allegiance. It's not a Nighthaunt sub-allegiance. It's something entirely by itself. So it's a bit strange.
But then it can't take any battalions, can it? But then it's a tricky one. And I honestly don't. I can't give you a definitive answer. And that is going to be like the lockdown briefings we've been getting lately. So that's sort of answer. Right. Okay. So 60 points. I was right with that as well. I'm down on myself because I got the first few spells wrong. Apologies. So I want to make sure that was right. Because 60 points for this, I'd rather have a command point. Unless I was really going with the bravery bomb. Much rather have a command point. Because it affects you as well. Like.
Yeah, but granted, death and demon armies tend to not mind very much.
Yeah, but what about
baseline 10?
If you've got a, I don't know, Iron Jaws army?
Yeah, that you probably wouldn't want to take this one.
I think aesthetically it doesn't really fit either, but if you use the exact same model.
I mean, to be fair, having a giant war boss head screaming at you would also be more scary. You could convert it.
Yeah, you convert that, and then you wouldn't even need to buy the Forbidden Power Box then. Cool. Okay, so next one. This is the Shards of Valaga. I presume that's how it's pronounced. So, how it works. Firstly, casting a 5+. You set up Holy Within... Okay, so there are... Is it? Yes, there are 2 models to this one. So, you set up the first one, Holy Within 6 inches of the caster. And then the second shard, Holy Within 12 inches of the first. At the start of the battle round, after determining who has the first turn, the players must roll off. The winner can remove 1 shard of Valaglar. Just pronounce it wrong every time. Models from this and the spell from the battlefield. I've said that completely wrong. Let me start again. Apologies. At the start of the battle round, after determining who has the first turn, the players must roll off. The winner can remove 1 of the shards model from this end of spell, and they can move them off the battlefield and set it up again anywhere on the battlefield, wholly within 12 inches of the other shard model from the end of spell. So you can pick one up, and essentially you're moving one of the shards, one of the models. And then what it does, so at the start of the movement phase, draw an imaginary straight line 1mm wide between the closest parts of the bases of the 2 shard models from the end of spell. Each unit passed across by the line is ensnared until the end of that turn. Half the move characteristics of a unit that is ensnared. In addition, subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made by units that are ensnared. So I said strength is good to debuff your enemy's movement and to hit, and then it can obviously debuff you and the weaknesses, and it is unreliable. It's going to cost you 40 points. So when I first saw this, I thought it was really good and really cool, because I played against a lot of Deep King Eel armies, and I was like, this is going to be a great way to shut off that movement. But when I looked at it more recently, I'm not really a fan of it, because it is it's quite unreliable. It works differently to a lot of the other ender spells, because instead of just moving it normally at the start of the battle round, you know, your opponent may be moving it first, depending on who's got the priority. You have to do a separate roll off. Oh no, so what's it, at the start of the battle round after the turns, the players must, yes, you have to do a separate roll off to see who moves this.
Yeah, this is
very random.
I dislike the spell on so many levels. First of all, it just looks like they took the Nighthaunt terrain scatter and just put some squiggly lines on it, and call it an enter spell.
They wouldn't have done that.
I think they have a very almost identical looking terrain piece in their Night Vault terrain kit.
Stuff. Shade bar stuff.
Yeah, like shade glass pyramids or whatever. Yeah, first that. Second of all, on all the confusion that is endless spells in the first place, why did you have to add another roll-off after the roll-off, after the decision?
It's just, it reminds me of, like, let's say you're trying to get into endless spells, and that's probably why you're watching this video, and like, let's say this is the first endless spell you ever look at on a war scroll to try and understand, going, you know what, I might start using them, and then you go, how the hell does this even, like, it just contradicts how normal endless spells work. It's
it's just weird. It interrupts the sequence of gameplay to deal with another wholly unique mechanic that is not entertaining.
No. Maybe if you use it, it's better than it sounds, but I'm not a fan. Right, so the next one. Now, this is something that we hinted on earlier, and this is going to be the Soul Scream Bridge. So this is a 2-piece model again. where basically you have two halves or a bridge, and it's a way to teleport around. So how it works, it casts on a 6+. You set up the first one, wholly within 6 inches of the caster, and the second bridge wholly within 12 inches of the first, or wholly within 24 inches of the first if you're playing in the realm of death. What it does at the start of your movement phase, friendly units wholly within 6 inches of a one Soul Screen bridge model from this endless spell can travel across the Soul Screen bridge. If they do so, remove that unit from the battlefield and set it up again wholly within 6 inches of the other Soul Screen bridge model. From this endless spell, more than 9 inches from any enemy unit, that unit cannot make a normal move that phase. So you can subtract 1 from the bravery characteristics of enemy units while they are within 6 inches of a Soul Scream bridge model. This ability has no effect on death units, so for strengths, great for movement, adds towards a bravery bomb kind of, and weaknesses, it is expensive because this thing's going to cost you 80 points, and it can debuff you with your bravery if you're not playing death. So this is I've never actually seen it played against me on the table, or I've never used it, but I know a lot of people do speak positively about this spell for the teleport.
This spell is absolutely terrifying, especially in Cities of Sigmar due to the guaranteed empowerment.
Yep.
The reason why this is also better than the other, despite not being able to move afterwards, is that Wholly Within 6 is far more realistically achievable for most armies than Wholly Within 3.
And the base on this one, I don't know for sure, but it looks bigger than the Soulfarer.
It is bigger. It is way bigger. In addition to that, important to mention is, while it does state that the models that teleported with this, or units that teleported with this, cannot move afterwards, it does not say that this counts as the models move, as any other teleportation effect does. Meaning that I've experienced this at the hands of that guy. Meaning that since this does not count as a model's move, models that have, let's say, 2 shots if they did not move in the previous the previous movement phase, still get the additional shots. Rules as written. That's it.
I thought you were about to say that they can make another move, and I was like, oh, well, it says here, but no, you say about the shooting. It's like, did you hear my sigh? Where it's like, look, I will look at it as, right, so like, I don't know, the Soulfarer where they can move afterwards, and I see that as because they quickly jump onto the boat, not much energy is used. This thing, you can clearly see you need to walk upon the bridge to get to the other side. So
yeah.
What do you say to that guy? Fine. #fine.
I told him that it's probably not in the spirit of the spell, but it is clearly rules as written. Therefore, I could not argue.
I mean, you can say it's not in the spirit of the spell because there's actually a spirit and power in the spell, but I don't know. But this is actually a good spell, and I kind of wish I kept it. Instead, I just cut one of them up to make a corpse cart. If any of you have seen a picture of my Flesh-Eater corpse cart, this is how I made the ribcage to contain all the corpses.
Just so you know why I'm so angry at this spell, think of a max-sized squadron of Iron Drakes alongside with 2 Rune Priests and the Luminac of... no, not the Luminac, the other one, the Celestial Hurricaneum, being teleported across the field, still getting double shots.
Yeah.
That's why I don't like this spell. It's not fun.
Again, a lot of it comes down to who's using the spell.
Yeah, it's a very good-looking spell. It's very flavorful, especially in death armies, but it's way more terrifying in most other armies.
It's funny enough. It's terrifying in it's Sigmar, which is kind of opposite to death armies, like lore wise.
I mean, the city could be located in the realm of death. Who knows?
Is it Helmforge? Something like that, isn't it? But the one
I have no idea.
The one in Soul Wars. There was I've forgotten the name. But anyway, there are cities of Sigmar in Shaiish. Right, okay. So, and 80 points though. We haven't really mentioned that too much. It is expensive.
But absolutely worth it.
Absolutely worth it, yeah?
Yes.
Would you take this with your grots?
With my grots, probably not, because 12-inch range is... I also have Hand of Gorg,
That's
or
very
Hand of
true.
Morg, whatever. I already have a teleportation effect that is not limited by where I can set up the model, but especially when this one is empowered, and therefore in all cities of Sigma, 24-inch range on this spell is absolutely great.
Yeah, I think if you're not empowered, you are looking at it and thinking like, the unit I want to teleport, is it better off just making its own normal move and then a charge? Like, is it really going to benefit that much? Can the enemy use it against you? They can't, can they? From what I can read.
Very unlikely, because you would always position one end close to the units you want to teleport. Meaning since you have to end up outside of 9 of enemies, the other side would be unavailable to the enemy.
Oh yeah, but what I'm saying is that if the enemy was in range and there was nothing stopping them doing it, can they actually physically use the bridge to teleport? Or was it only one way? Is it only the person who set it up can use the bridge?
I think so. I see nothing in the rules preventing them from doing so, but that scenario is wholly unrealistic. There.
English. Yeah, a lot of holy. Right, okay. Next spell. So this is something that's not on Forbidden Power, and this is because it is still available to everyone, but it is a bit unique, and you can't really buy it anymore from Games Workshop, I don't think, because I couldn't find it on the website. So this is the Balewind Vortex. So it's going to cost you 40 points. How it works, so it casts on 6, and there's a few things to it, so bear with me. So cast on 6, you set it up within 1 inch of the caster and 3 inches away from any enemy models. Only single model wizards with 8 or less wounds can cast this spell. The Balewind Vortex counts as the model for measuring and being in range. Because essentially you cast a spell, your wizard goes on top of the Balewind Vortex on the platform, and the whole model of the Balewind Vortex is included into the model of the wizard, so it makes it a much bigger footprint. So what it does, so add 6 inches to the range of spells. This is an important time to mention though, you cannot add to the range of endless spells. That has to be, I have seen that FAQ'd. So this is not going to be able to add range to your endless spell casting. It's like the same as Arcana Black. I think it's the first of the Mortarks' command ability that lets you add 6 inches to the range of spells. That's not going to work for endless spells as well. Okay, so back to this one. So add 6 inches to your range of normal spells. It allows you to cast an extra spell as well. That also means if you cast this spell to set up, you can then cast an additional spell once you're upon it. You also get +1 to the wizard's save. So what I said for strengths, I said great spell casting potential, good for wizards that want to sit back and don't need to get up close to do all their work to the enemy. It's also cheap, I think, for 40 points. Weaknesses, I say you cannot move, you are fixed there. And then it's obviously only good for small to medium sized wizards, because if they're too big they can't go on it, or if they're like a Sisters of the Fawn or something like that, they can't be on top of it as well. Now I don't hear loads of people really talk about this spell anymore, but I really like it. I've taken it to tournaments. I put an Archregent on there. That means that his spell, where he can basically make people get D3 extra attacks, now has a range of 30 inches. The Archregent now has a 3+ save, healing D3 a turn, in each hero phase. And for the reason I really like it is for all those spells that are now wholly within, it is adding that extra 6 inches. And it depends how lucky deployment is, but like if you've got like arcane terrain in your territory, so that's the terrain feature that gives you +1 to your save, I can put this Balewind Vortex next to that and next to my throne for my Flesh-Eater Court, so that means that I'm getting +1 to cast, and I'm going to be using my command ability for free to bring on like 20 ghouls or something. I know that's quite specific, but it worked really well in that case, and I don't really see anyone else taking it. What are your thoughts, Max?
Pretty much the same. I really like the spell, but by the time I noticed how good the spell is, that I want to have it, I couldn't find it anywhere anymore. So I think one would probably have to convert one nowadays.
Yeah, it's one of those where like I said, I've got one, so I haven't really tried hard to try and find one. So I was going to say you probably pick it up second hand for not too much, but then again, because you can't buy it anymore, people are probably like, right, I'm going to times the price by 10, and it's like, why?
Yeah. So it is really great for any type of wizard that doesn't want to move too much, or for any type of army that has a terrain piece that supports your wizard, like for example the Ogre Maw tribes, which have the Great Maw Pot, which gives wizards nearby a +1 to cast, and you want to have your wizard nearby any be able to soup, so to say. And as it so happens, both Butcher and Slaughtermaster have 7 wounds, so they can fit perfectly onto that thing.
Yeah, like it is great. On the War Scroll, it actually says if you've got less than 9 wounds. But the reason I put 8 or less is just because people will remember. Because if you see the number 9, you'll think, oh, it's 9 wounds, can I do it? But like you say, for Ogre Maw tribes, you can do that. It's cool, and it's really good making the base size bigger. Obviously, it means that enemies can pile in and attack you more. But in some tournament games, when I was running it with my Archregent, I even was lucky enough to have like 2 arcane terrain features on my side of the board. So I'd set this up so it'd be within 1 inch of both of those terrain features. So I'd be getting +2 to cast that way, and then the Archregent was getting +1 to cast through his like command trait, and then he was going to get +1 to cast from a corpse cart, so he's getting like +4 to cast. And it's like, I know that's very situational, but it was like really good, like really nice.
Also, a bigger base size helps with. When I first heard people speaking of spells this way, I kind of like dismissed it. But having a larger base size really does improve what you can get wholly within certain aura type spells that are measured from the caster.
Yeah.
Especially for example, all units wholly within X get +1 attack or whatever. Having this bigger base size, this little bit, this just helps extend catching the last unit that you want to pile somewhere.
Yeah, it's there's something to mention with the base. It's not perfectly round, so like have a bit of leeway when you are measuring for range, because the rocks do jag out unevenly. But like you're saying, you're right, because like for example, when it says like add 60 to the range of your spells, for most wizards as well, you probably add in 1.5 inches, shall we say, of the size of the base of the Bellwind Vortex. So really, you're adding like anywhere between like 7 to 7.5 inches of extra range to your spells. So, for example, when I was running it with my Flesh-Eater Courts and I was taking Terrorgeists, when my Terrorgeists charged up forward and got in the enemy, they would no longer be wholly within 24 inches of my Archregent to be a pain in the arse and give them an extra D3 attacks. But on the Bellwind Vortex, they always seem to be within like 31.5 inch range. It's like
it's the tiniest bit of distance helps.
Exactly, and I'm glad you feel the same way about it, Max, because I don't know if it's just around where I am or from what I've heard from people, but I haven't really heard people talk negatively about it. But I don't really hear people talking mention it really for some reason.
I mean, I guess the downside is it isn't pretty. It isn't the prettiest sculpt. I mean, the tornado looks nice, but both the bottom and the top are not to my taste.
I like it. There are a lot of mold lines on it, I'll say that. Like, it is an old spell. Just one more good thing about it, though, it's like you are getting +1 to your save. So if you've got those wizards that have only got a 5-up save, and you're like, well, if I put them on top of this Bellwind Vortex, then he's like, everyone look at me, I've got a massive, I'm standing on a fucking massive hill, everyone shoot me. But that +1 save does help with that. Effectively, it's like being in terrain. Cool.
Also,
Yeah.
it helps with visibility actually, because you measure
Yeah.
visibility from any part of the model. Still,
Absolutely true. And depending on how tall the wizard is on top, that means that you could have a massive a view to target things with. But no, that's good. Okay, so I wanted to talk about this one for a little while because it's like you have to buy it separately, but you can't really buy it anymore. But I'm not gonna lie, especially with models you can't buy anymore. If you were to convert one up and use it against me, like you were saying, Max, you can convert one. Find a way to do it. Even if you're struggling to try and get it close to how the original model looks, but like the intent is there, I completely understand. Like,
to be honest, I would probably put effort into flavoring it. Like, for example, if I were to make one for my ogres, and if I were any good and had any capability of doing what I actually want to do, I would probably make it like a tornado of soup where the wizard stands on the lid of the pot.
that would be awesome. As long as in the soup you had a carrot, that'd be great. It just shows the flavour. Like on the action model, the only sort of the main theme you can add to it is just whatever colour you do the swirly bit. Also, if you are converting it up, don't make it like 5 foot tall, and then you can go ice as the whole entire land of my country, because then I will push it and knock it over and go, oh, it slipped. Right, so I saw, I don't know why it's reminding me of this, but I remember seeing someone do a giant, and they did it as if they were doing like a tight walking act, but on like a top of a brick wall. But the brick wall was about 5 inches tall, so it was like a really tall giant. And he said like he did it for like narrative reasons, so it looked funny, but I'm pretty sure he did it so when the giant fell over, it did more damage. Go like, oh, the wall fell over as well. Oh, that would hurt. Yeah, of course it would. Right, okay, so the next thing. And this is Army Pacific spells, so this is going to be more like a quick fire round. So essentially, first thing I want to talk about is Ostrich Bone Reapers, because we're mentioning a few unique things here. So what makes Ostrich Bone Reapers different? So they are soul-bound. So essentially, when they cast a spell, it is soul-bound to the caster. So that means it cannot be controlled by the enemy. So the enemy can't use your spells against you, which is great. These soul-bound spells get to move before any other spells, like any other ended spells. And the other thing, and this is the negative, a soul-bound wizard is -1 to cast. Is there anything else you want to add to that one, Max?
It's disgusting, it's powerful, and I hate them.
And they're really cheap. They're really cheap.
Yes.
So just to say, because now we're going to faction specific spells, like I mentioned at the start of the video, we're not talking about these guys' we're not going into the rules of the War Scrolls stuff, because we'd be here for days, quite honestly. But what I will say is, for some of the spells, I have done like in-depth reviews, like videos for them, for things like Flesh-Eater Courts, Gloomspite Gits. We did do one for Zeech, but that's no longer with us. What other ones have I done? Flesh-Eater Courts? I've already mentioned. But anyway, so basically when I do the long army series, I do cover the end of spells, so you can check that out at another time. Right, so that's what makes the Ostrich Bone Reapers different. They actually play quite differently as well, and this is just one of the parts to it. Because all their spells are actually, they actually will have uses as well. So they are dirty spells, but I also think look awesome. I mean, look at the Mongol looking thing. Absolutely great.
Disgusting.
Probably, to be fair though, probably not as broken as your Gloomspite Git spells. So.
Oh, come on.
I'm joking. No, they are.
The little mushrooms are gonna hurt.
Yeah, it's like, for example, the Bone Reaper one you can see on the screen. The one with like the 4 skulls and the pyramid on its head. I can't remember word for word, but it's something like all for any Ostrich Bone Reaper units that are like. No, it's if an enemy unit is wholly within 12 inches of the model, then for any Ostrich Bone Reaper units get to like reroll ones to hit against that enemy unit, or +1 to hit, or something like that. And like
I think it's +1 to hit and even more stuff.
Yeah, and that
multiple bonus.
And I think it makes the enemy -1 to bravery as well, maybe. And like the end of spell costs like 30 points. and the enemy can't move out of the way. Oh, it's great. Okay, so next one I wanted to talk about is so we've got Slaves to Darkness ones here, so that's just basically going through the pictures. So we've got Slaves to Darkness, Sylvaneth, Nighthaunt. I have reviewed Nighthaunt as well, that's another one I thought of, so you can go check that out. Fleshy Courts, glorious, very royal. Horse Spell is still one of my favourites. Gloons by Gits I have reviewed, they get 4 spells, so you're spoilt for choice. You have to admit though, you have nice looking spells.
Yeah, even though the way they're presented in by Games Workshop would look a bit boring to me.
Do you not like the spiders?
They're just... All these spells are just red and purple. I think mine look better.
Yeah,
not that my painting quality is better, but I like my colors better.
Yes, they probably said, right, we've got to get these painted in 5 minutes, quick. They probably actually had the contrast back then as well. No, yeah. I mean, what I want to see you do, Max, is paint every single spider a different colour.
No.
And have every single skull painted gold on the spiders.
I have every single skull painted like a skull.
Do you?
I do. I can post it into the Discord right now.
Yeah, please do, because I want to see that. And if you want to see that, join the Discord for sure. But you paint... Oh, gee, that's a lot of effort. Fair play to you. Right.
There you go.
Next one. So we got... Okay, actually, now that you've mentioned that, I will go to the Discord to check that out, because I can do it on here if it's gone well. Sound like a really old person talking about technology. Yeah, I can see that on your one. Yeah, you have painted them all differently, and you've actually done the joins of the legs painted. Yeah, fair play. You have put more effort into that than the Games Workshop looking one. Right, so the next thing that spells Skaven. If you're playing Skaven, most lists you want to get that Warp Lightning Vortex, which is the one with the 3-piece models. For sure, the other 2 spells aren't that great, but the Rat Swarms look awesome. So there's that.
Also, when you carry an Overlord, you also want the Vortex because you can.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're thinking,
you can take it.
You can take it. You can release it from a bottle. And if you're thinking, if you're Cadanova players, go, actually, you know what? Then I don't need the other 2 Skaven spells. I'm just going to look on eBay to get the Warp Lightning Vortex. You will not be able to buy that spell separately because I'm pretty sure that's the most popular one. So have to buy the whole box.
Yeah.
But
tough luck.
But you can have like all the little rats from the rat swarm like chasing after your ships on the ground on the bases. I don't know. Or like maybe the rats have made like a little ladder to try and get to your ship. I really don't know. To use the flying stand because the normal flying stands aren't good. Right. Beasts of Chaos. So they have some cool looking spells. When I say they have some cool ones, I mainly mean the Massive Ball. That can be used in other armies where you can ally like a Beast of Chaos Shaman because it's a way to make the enemy fight last. We did talk about that in depth in a Zeech video, which we will not mention. So there's that. You've got Hidden.
I like the horn.
The horn's cool. It's not as big as the ball though.
No, it's not. Also not visually as impressive maybe, but it's useful. And still good looking, I think.
That's cool. The question is for the horn, the picture I'm looking at, you know there's like the chaotic symbols written on it. Is that freehand? Mm-hmm. Do you see the chaotic symbols that are written on the horn?
I do. Let me check if they are.
Are they freehand or are they engraved? Because if they are freehand, then it takes a lot away from the model.
Let me check. It looks like they are freehand.
Yeah, see that's misleading. I might be completely wrong. I'm just trying to find something bad to say about the model. Right, Hidden Knights of Sinesh. Yeah, the spell mirrors, the spell mirror thing is very good. And then the other stuff just looks very kinky, which I'm not going to object to. We've got Stormcast Eternals, which I did my best to try and leave them as last as I could, because they're so boring. But you've got the Comet, that's good. I've heard that some people even ally in a Stormcast Wizard just to put the Comet in there. You've also got a Hoverboard for the Stormcast Eternals. So if you've got a slow wizard and you want to move them around quickly, you've got the spinning hammer thing. Right, next thing. Seraphon. So they have no unique endless spells. However, they can pay an additional 10 extra points for normal endless spells, which make them abound and the enemy cannot use them against them. So essentially you pay an extra 10 points and whoever casts the endless spell from your side of things becomes bound to the endless spell. So that means the endless spells... Pardon?
Take a bound life swarm. Take it.
Because that means that the enemy cannot use against it. Like we said with like Life Swarm, perfect example you mentioned there, because we said in Pacific lists we could see it being used, but in most cases not. There's a Pacific situation where it would be good. I don't believe that the spells are empowered like the Cities of Sigmar, but you can stop the enemy using them, which is great, because as you can see, most of the endless spells have gone through pretty much a weakness, which was almost every time was it can hurt you, it can debuff you, the enemy can use it against you, etc. This negates that. And depending on what spell it is, especially if it's a cheap one, you might go, I don't really want to pay an extra 10 extra points. But for something that is already costing you like 60 points or something, you're already putting a lot of investment in there, you might want to just pay like the extra 10 points to make it really go worth the while. Would you agree to that, Max?
Absolutely. Like spells like the Geminids, who can backfire quite a lot, perfectly valuable and good in the Seraphon list, because they cannot. The Life Swarm, my objection to it was mainly that healing might be more beneficial to your opponent, or just as beneficial to them as it is to you. With this, it depends if you have the 10 points or not. Since I don't play Seraphon myself, I can't attest to list building, to how it feels building a list for them. But if you have the 10 extra points...
So when I spoke to Monty when we did the Why I Play Seraphon that I uploaded recently, he was very keen on you can pay an extra 10 points from what I gathered. So he thinks it's quite good. But yeah, of course, you know, like when you're bang on the nose of 2,000 points and stuff, or you need an extra 10 points for something else to be able to fit in another unit, like...
Also, you have a Slan. Are they +2 or +3 to cast? I'm not even sure.
I can't remember. But they
either way,
it's very,
they get the spells off.
Yeah, they're very magic powerful army. So and 10 extra points is not a lot. If it was 20 extra points, I could see a lot of people going like, "Oh, it's a lot of an investment." But 10, nah. They were never going to make it 5 points. So that's not bad. One thing I will say, the biggest weakness about this does not make up for the fact that they didn't get any endless spells. But I don't know. It's better than nothing. Because that is precisely what they got. Right. Next thing to talk about is Endless Prayers. And that's probably not what they're called, but that's what I'm going to call them. So you've got like Judgments of Khorne, and then you've got the Fire Slayer ones, which I do not know the name. Right, so this is quite quick because even I am not as common on how these work. So what I have got though, so like for the Blades of Khorne, and this is like, I imagine how it works with Fire Slayers as well, but not completely sure. If you do have Fire Slayers and you're annoyed that I don't know how it works, but you have the Battle Tome, you can read the Battle Tome and find out yourself. Right, so essentially, priests summon them on a d6 in like the hero phase. So instead of like casting with 2 dice, you do it on 1 dice. The enemy can't unbind it because it's like a normal prayer. You roll a dice, and then depending on what you're trying to summon, it'll be like on a 3+ or a 4+ you get to summon up. You then set up like an endless spell, like wholly within whatever range of whatever it says on its war scroll. And then you roll a dice to see if it will disappear at the end of the turn as well. And that's how they deal with the fact that you can't unbind these prayers because they're not spells. So you can't unbind them. So you're kind of stuck with, how do I get rid of them? There's a chance they might disappear at the end of the turn. That's like the caveat. And they cannot. The best thing about them is they cannot be controlled by the enemy. Is that from what you understand as well, Max?
I think you get a bonus to the roll when priests are nearby to those spells. Like you have a better chance of them sticking around.
I think with Khorne you get +1 to the roll, and I think with Khorne it's on a On a 5, they stay. But if you've got a priest nearby, it's on a 4, they stay. From what I can remember.
But either way, since these are prayers, and I think most lists say that every single priest can try to attempt to cast any single prayer he knows every hero phase. So it's not like you're giving up a spell for these. So
No.
they are also more powerful in that way.
Yeah, exactly. You're not making that much of a sacrifice. Again, it does work like end the spells in the sense of you can't have like 5 of the big corn axes or something in your list. You know, you can only take 1.
Could you imagine? I think corn players would do that because these things are so good.
Oh yeah, like I've had them fought against me once, and it did hurt me more than I thought it would.
Hex Drinker Skulls. How much of a pain are they when you're playing Nagash?
I don't like to talk about it. Yeah, they are a massive pain. I rolled an 8. What does that mean? Ah, funny you should say that. Yeah,
you no longer know the spell.
Yeah, but it was a really good one, and I didn't mean to cast it. Doesn't matter. Does not matter. I'm going to try and cast Spell Portal. Aha. So no, it's good. And then you have the very angry vagina corn thing. Very, very. Look at it. Look how angry it looks. Like, look at his eyes. And then with the fire slayers, you have the palisade with the ruins on it. You have the big cool golem thing coming out of the ground, and then you have the the burning head, but it doesn't really have much character to it.
I think it's supposed to be just like a magma geyser. How do you pronounce that word?
Gazier? No, that's definitely not how you pronounce that word. Gazer. It's like
Gazer?
It's like Gazer.
Either way, people know what we mean, and they will make fun of us for it.
Yep, I'm sure. Well, if they watched the video all the way this far, then they deserve to make fun of us. To be fair to them, but that's all I really wanted to say about them. To be fair, and just the other thing to say, like something we've mentioned as well, is Caldon Overlords don't have endless spells. They don't have like the wizards to cast them, but they have that one artifact that allows them to release a endless spell out of a bottle. So they have got a way to do it. And I think that's pretty much covered. So just a summary of how they generally work again. So they cost additional points. They cast like normal spells. Only one endless spell can be cast by each wizard per turn. Can be unbound in your hero phase instead of casting a spell. Move at the start of the battle round after priority has been decided, but before the first turn of the battle round begins. And why that's kind of important is, like, you know, Marathi can only take like 3 damage a turn. This is as far as I'm aware, this is like an extra way to take damage on her. And then also the player going second in the battle round can move the first spell. Bear in mind, like we said with Ostrich Bone Reaper, so those spells kind of move first. It then says they can be dispelled and cast again in the same turn in case you want to redeploy them, or one player can't have 2 of the same spells in his or her list. And you also said I can't set up a pendulum and then my opponent sets up a pendulum. You can only have 1 on the table.
Yeah, as far as I know, and I might be wrong with that, but I think this is a rule to this day. Might have changed. That and the spells are supposed to be unique on the table.
Cool. And I think to be honest, that's something where I can speak for myself as well. Like I said, I've definitely learned stuff researching these endless spells, and I definitely don't know. I definitely don't know everything about endless spells because I'm still getting experience from using them, because I'm still like using new ones. And now that I've got a load of new ones, I can really try them out. But it's very important to start using them, seeing what they can do. Just experiment really is the main thing. Like, even if you want to chuck, I don't know, like 4 into your list, which you think like, oh, but that's not really a smart choice or a good idea. But just so you can see in that game just how they will interact, it's not a bad idea. Because remember that even if you want to just go, I don't want to play these, I don't want, and then like there's a store tournament or something, you can guarantee that you'll fight an opponent who will be using a endless spell. So it's important for you to know how they work, to know that you can just dispel them and get rid of them. But honestly, the one thing I hope you can take away from watching this video is they're not as complicated as you first think. Is that a fair thing to say, Max?
It is. They look very intimidating at first, but pretty much you can categorize them into the predatory ones and the stationary ones. And once you know how these categories work roughly, you have an idea how to use any of them.
Yeah, I'd agree. And the other thing I'd say about, and the spells, if you're, especially if you're very new and you're looking at it and you think like, oh, I have to buy the whole Malign Sorcery box set and everything like that, then I have to read the whole book to understand how they work. You don't need to read the whole book to understand how it works. I've tried to break it down just very simply for you that, you don't need to read a whole fucking book of rules to understand how they work. And what I would also say about Malign Sorcery is I was at the start, like I said, I didn't really use Ender spells, and I was like, if I want to use them, I'll just buy them all separately. It's fine, I'll probably buy them cheaper that way. I ended up buying a few Ender spells I wanted separately on eBay, and because they were the more popular ones, they costed more money. I bought the books separately, and then I ended up just buying all of Malign Sorcery for luckily a good price, but I still spent more money buying it all separately than I would have done if I just bought it all in one go. So,
yeah, I would also like to add that even if you don't want to use Ender spells, I think you should get Malign Sorcery because of the artifacts in there. Because you will want those artifacts. You will want to know what they do, and you will want to have access to it because some of them are really, really good.
Yeah, agreed. You can get the the gaming book for Age of Sigmar, which has got basically it's a small A5 size book with all the information and also the artifacts and spells from Malign Sorcery in that book. But it's not as, especially if you're new, it's not as welcoming to read because it's smaller and stuff. So the Malign Sorcery book is nicer. The last thing I want to say, guys, is when I put up a suggestion on who would like this, because Matt suggested it in the Discord, I was sort of overwhelmed a little bit by how many likes I got for that community post, or how many people you were interested. And that's something I also wanted to say. Really am happy with recently when I've been putting up quite a few community posts saying to guys would you be interested in this video or that video. You guys have responded really well, because it really helps me to understand what videos you guys want when you essentially you tell me if an idea is good or not, and it means I can provide a more variety of content. And so I really hope that I've helped you out with this video. I really hope this is the sort of video you wanted. I know, like I said at the start, a couple of mistakes were made, but rectified them. And I hope you understand how they work a little bit more, and we'll start using them in games. Even if you just use one, just see how that goes. And I hope that helps. And if you've got any questions, leave them in the comments down below, and I'll be happy to answer them best I can. So is there anything else you want to add to that one, Max?
Oh, I think we're good with that.
Fantastic. Okay, guys, well, thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, please like, subscribe and comment down below, as that massively does help. As always, and absolutely free for you guys to do so. Massive shout out to all my patrons as well, really do help me provide as much content as possible, and especially Max as well, who's joined us on this, and thank you for sharing your expertise as well and your time on this. Also, thank you to Matt as well, who joined us earlier, and I'm glad that he got a little bit of advice out of this. Okay, guys, so until next time, remember, stay safe, stay inside, wash your hands, all that sort of thing. Social distance as best you can. If you're part of this community, you're probably quite good at social distancing, so that's great. And remember, until next time, Nagash is all, and all is one in Nagash.
Gorka Morka!